Welcome everyone to the Council meeting for the 26th of July 2022, which I now declare open. Welcome to everyone in the gallery who are joining us tonight, and also welcome to everyone who is watching online. Obviously, as well as being live streamed, the video recording of this meeting will be available on our website, so attendees, just please be noted that your presence may be recorded in the gallery. I'll ask for mobile phones just to be switched to silent too, if possible, please. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which we're meeting, that of the Wurundjeri people of the Keeler Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people that are here with us today or joining us online. Now, Councillors, item 2 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and for the first time in a long time we have all 9 councillors all present, which is very exciting considering we're still in the middle of winter. So we will move on to the confirmation of minutes. Can I please have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 12th of July 2022 please be confirmed. Move Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Bettio. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 4 on the agenda is conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have an conflict of interest that they wish to declare on any item on the agenda tonight? Councillor Bettio.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest on agenda item 12.1 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO.
Thanks, Councillor Bettio. Any other councillor?
Mayor, I'd like to declare a general conflict of interest for item 12.1, and written notice with reasons has been provided to the CEO in accordance with Governance Rule 2.2. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor? Councillor Nation?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm declaring a conflict of interest in item 12.1 and item 7, public question time, questions 3 and 4. Both for reasons provided to the CEO in writing prior to the commencement of this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Any other conflicts for tonight's meeting? No. All right. Item 6 is petitions and joint letters, and councillors, I don't believe we have any. No, so we'll move on to public question time, which we have received 4 questions this evening. So I'll start with the first question, which is from Ian Woods. Thank you, Ian, for your question.
Sorry, I've just had a presentation. Did we up to that? Did we skip over presentations?
I did. I'll come back to presentations after public question time, if that's okay. Apologies. Public question time from Ian Woods. Thank you, Ian, for your question. The Chain of Ponds document, which MVCC initiated and endorsed, clearly indicated that Strathnaver Reserve is a flood detention basin. Since MVC Council has proposed spending $820,000 on resurfacing, Strathnaver Reserve has a detailed report with recommendations, including success rates, being prepared by experts. Perhaps the site is just not fit for purpose. And I'll pass to the CEO for a response.
Thank you, Ian. To the Mayor, Council has engaged specialist sporting field design consultants to ensure that Council's investment in Strathnaver Reserve is not wasted. It is Council's expectation that the proposed works will allow the sporting field area to be resilient to both high rainfall and riverine flooding, should that occur. In the event of flood conditions, the field would not be accessible. However, a return to usable condition would be expected with minimal intervention. Further, given the location and the nature of the reserve, design and construction will also need to meet Melbourne Water's requirements. Technical reports provided to Council by consultants are operational in nature and have not been presented to the public. Council officers will revisit the issues you have raised with both designers and prospective contractors through the tender process to create assurance that the proposed investment is well spent. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And I note that you may have touched on this question too, but I will still read it. So question 2 from Ian Woods. Further to question 1, as a matter of transparency, was such a report presented to MVC councillors and to the public?
Thank you, Yan. Through the Mayor, yes, the technical reports provided to Council by consultants are operational in nature and therefore they have not been and will not be presented to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. We're up to question 3, and Councillor Nation has declared a conflict on this item and has now left the chamber. So question 3 from Peter Robinson. Thank you, Peter, for your questions. 3 and 4 are from Peter. The management of the East Keeler Aquatic Centre are now regularly closing all indoor lanes bar one while the outdoor pool is also closed. The closed lanes are booked out for a fee. This leaves one 25-metre lane for members, ratepayers, elderly and children, and slow and fast swimmers. Management state that their contract requires them to leave open one lane only. This has now become common on what used to be less busy weekends. Amazingly, several lanes are booked out for birthdays and blow-up jumping castles are only used for minutes. Why does the council allow this to happen, and how can ample lanes be made available to members and ratepayers? And I will pass to the CEO, Helen Swee, for a response.
Thank you, Peter. Through the Mayor, Council officers have raised your queries with our contract partner and facility manager, Belgravia Leisure, who has advised that they will ensure 3 lanes are available for the public use, i.e. lap swimming and recreational play in the indoor 25-metre pool. Thank you.
Thank you. And Peter's second question reads, in reference to the East Keeler Aquatic Centre, can the council answer the following question? The build budget not taking into account downsizing of planned infrastructure blew out by nearly $20 million. How was this financed? And I will pass that question on to the CEO for response.
Thank you, Peter. Through the Mayor, the Keeler East Aquatic Centre redevelopment project was completed in 2021 with a total cost of $51.7 million within the approved budget of $53 million for this project. This redevelopment was supported by a $3 million state government grant, with the remaining funded by a combination of rates and borrowing. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll ask for Councillor Nation to come back into the room. Now, councillors, I do apologise. My staple that was keeping my papers together has seen better days, and I accidentally skipped over item 5, which is presentation. So we'll just come back to that. So, Councillor Nation, thank you for joining us. I was just saying we're going back to item 5 as I accidentally skipped over that. So I will ask for presentations, and if any councillor has any presentations they want to make tonight. Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. In line with the Council expenses policy, I'd like to present to Council my written report following approved interstate travel to Canberra for the ALGA conference. The report can be found in attachment 1 for report 9.1 of tonight's meeting agenda. I've also emailed the report to the CEO prior to the meeting. As the requirement is for a written report, I won't take up time speaking to it and would encourage anyone interested to have a look at the report. The conference provided for extensive reflections about the role and work of the 500 plus local governments in Australia, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have participated. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Were there any other presentations for tonight? Councillor Nation?
I did just want to make a special note that since we last met, Avondale FC has progressed to the round of 16 in the Australia Cup, which is extremely exciting. That gives them probably about a 1 in 8 chance of playing an A-League club. It'd be lovely to be able to host a game here. I don't think we'll be able to, but much like the FA Cup over in England, sometimes you get smaller clubs playing some of the big A-League teams. And actually in this current round of 32, Western United meet Melbourne Victory. So well done to Avondale FC, beat Mindelaces 6-0 up in Darwin, travelled to Darwin. And so through to the round of 16 again. Back in 2018, a few of us went out to what was then John Illam Park to see them lose in extra time to Sydney FC in the quarterfinals. But from a a municipal perspective, it is fantastic to see a local club performing at such a high level. So they don't know who their opponents are yet until the round of 32 is completed, but well done Avondale FC, and we look forward to tracking their journey. And if it is a home game, which will be out at Broadmeadows probably, which is the closest venue that can host Australia Cup round of 16 games, then let's rug up and head out there if it's not a Tuesday, because it's a great experience standing out there and watching potentially an A-League club having to travel to suburban Melbourne to play. So well done Avondale FC.
Thank you, Councillor Nation.
Yeah, can I just make one further presentation very briefly? Sorry.
Yeah,
I just wanted to give a shout out to Jasmine, who's the Senior Operator Customer Relations Team at Hisense Australia Proprietary Limited. They're not a local company, but they have come to the aid of a resident of the Flemington Public Housing Towers this week, very promptly, when the resident was denied she'd bought a new fridge a couple of months ago, which unfortunately, due to a cockroach infestation in the housing estate, stopped working, and there was a refusal to deal with the warranty was deemed invalid because of a vermin infestation in the public housing. And Hisense customer service, when I asked on behalf of the resident whether there couldn't be some compassionate grounds for the fridge to be replaced, responded within a matter of hours and have organised for the resident to receive a new fridge. I've also emailed our local member to see if any infestations in our public housing might be able to be addressed quickly so that similar issues don't happen again. But I'd really like to thank Hisense for their really prompt and compassionate response. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other presentations for tonight? No, and we have done items 6 and 7 on the agenda. So we are up to item 8 on the agenda, which is reports from delegates. Do we have any reports from delegates tonight? No. So we are now up to item 9.1 on the agenda, which is the ALGA 2022 conference report post-conference. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And a seconder, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, just noting that all written reports have been received and presented. You'll see from reading the reports that councillors who do attend the National General Assembly get plenty of benefit from attending, and by benefit I mean benefit for them to fulfil their role as a councillor, but also benefit for the municipality, be it through advocacy meetings or even just connecting with councillors of neighbouring councils. I know myself, I had some really good catch-ups and beneficial catch-ups, particularly with neighbouring Brimbank councillors, and also the advocacy that yourself as Mayor and the Deputy did in relation to travelling out to see some notable dignitaries. But also one of the really important parts of the trip was continuing our journey to try to seek funding for a headspace. And a really beneficial meeting was had with the federal member for Maribyrnong, and also on the final day, yourself and the Deputy Mayor met with representatives to hopefully keep pushing our aim to get a headspace delivered in our area. But I do commend the reports to the public to read. This is something that I think former councillor Shirley Cornish might have brought in for councillors to provide reports following their trips, or I shouldn't say trips, but interstate travel and attendance at conferences or advocacy trips. So it's a good piece of reflection for us to think about what we've learnt, how we use our time, what we see as value when we go away, but also a chance for the community to understand that a lot of the time, be it within our community or outside our community, we're wearing our councillor badge 24/7, and particularly up in Canberra at the National General Assembly, everything we spoke about was council, be it to other councillors or officers or those that we met with. So I commend these reports and would encourage the public to have a look at what we have hopefully managed to achieve, and then I hope that some of the outcomes that, I hope that our attendance at ELGA will be the catalyst for some really good outcomes, particularly when it comes to delivering headspace in our municipality. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have much more to add, but I'll concur with everything that you've said, Councillor Nation. A highlight for me was the advocacy efforts that, in particular, you and I undertook, Mayor, when we met with federal representatives from the Department of Health to work towards our advocacy for a headspace in Moonee Valley. I think we've made strides in that field, so I look forward to hopefully seeing some fruits from this advocacy trip in the coming months and years.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Nation, would you like to close? We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.2 on the agenda is 5 Thelma Avenue, Essendon North, lot 447 on plan of subdivision 8660. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion, please.
Thanks, Councillor Adams.
That Council, with respect to an application for review against Council's failure to decide the application within the prescribed time, resolves to advise the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, VCAT, and other parties to the application that if Council were in a position to decide on the application, that the decision would have been to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV/729/2021 at 5 Thelma Avenue, Essendon North, open brackets, lot 447 on plan of subdivision 8660, close brackets, for the use and development of the land for community care accommodation in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1, the proposal fails to meet the objectives and strategies of clauses 15.01-5L and clause 55.02-1, neighbourhood character, of the Moonee Valley planning scheme and would result in an urban design outcome that fails to positively contribute to the local context and enhance the public realm. 2, the proposal fails to comply with the following provisions of Clause 55 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. A, Clause 55.03-1, street setback. B, Clause 55.03-3, site coverage. C, Clause 55.03-10, parking location. D, Clause 55.04-1, side and rear setbacks. E, Clause 55.04-6, overlooking. F, Clause 55.05-1, accessibility. G, Clause 55.05-4, private open space. H, Clause 55.05-6, storage. And I, Clause 55.06-1, design detail. And 3, the proposal represents an overdevelopment of the site.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you, Mayor. This application seeks planning approval for the community care accommodation, which is a specialist disability accommodation for residents that are funded by the NDIS, which is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I don't put refusals up lightly, and this is one in particular that I've had a hard time deciding on, as I'm absolutely in support of disability accommodation and diversity in housing in our municipality. I'm actually just really disappointed in this application, as I don't believe the design outcome and massing of this development is in keeping with the neighbourhood character of this pocket in Essendon North, and it's a missed opportunity to deliver quality, much-needed disability housing in Moonee Valley. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. happy to support this motion by Councillor Adams, and thank you for putting this refusal up. I'd certainly agree with Councillor Adams that this is one of the more difficult applications to decide on for a number of reasons. Obviously, the intent with what, or the aim with what they want to achieve here to help people with disabilities at this site is obviously, certainly to be commended, and one that council, would certainly support. It's just in this block is, and this application for this block, it's just such in a difficult location. And if we're looking at where the DDO line sits, the DDO is on the southern side of Dudley Street, and this application is to the north of that. So it's not in the DDO area, which would potentially, would give rise to sort of a more intense development happening. So that's one of my big concerns. The siting on the block is really, it's difficult to even understand how it will actually work in practicality, really, for myself. And just the bulk and the scale of it on this corner, it's effectively a corner between two adjoining streets. It's just not the right site for this type of application. I don't think there's any other way I can really describe it. There's lots of issues with setbacks and the traffic in that little pocket. There's obviously always pressure from Keeler Road businesses parking along Dudley Street and into these side shoot streets off Dudley, and obviously including Grace, Delma, and all along there. And I know the residents are very worried about that as well, and just how that this application will impact the residential feel of that area. And at the end of the day, it's a residential area, and I know this is for residential units as well, obviously, but it is a really hard one to decide on. But I think for me, just its location, its mass on the block, and its location. Did I say location? It doesn't matter. I'm happy to support the refusal, but the intent of what they want to achieve here on this site is certainly a worthy thing, and something that council really does need to support. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Right on time. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I concur with my fellow councillors to the extent that this is a challenging application. I guess for me, something that I've heard multiple occasions in my time on council, particularly when it comes to planning applications, is I've got no issue with this, it's just not in the right site, or I don't have problems with development, but just not next to me. And that's sort of the issue with when assessing this application, because I'm sure all 9 of us will sit around and say this is a commendable application. We through multiple policies support particularly specialist disability accommodation, but this is just not the right spot. So does that mean that anyone who wants to reside in specialist disability accommodation, which in essence is a house, a residential units, has to live on a major arterial or has to live in an activity centre? Like, is that what we are saying? Are we saying that you, despite the council's actual planning scheme clause 1902 says ensure health facilities and other uses such as community care facilities should be located in local areas where they can be integrated with the community, we're saying, look, no, that integration can only happen in an activity centre or on Mount Road. You know what, if you're living with a specialist disability, maybe you don't want to live on Mount Road. Like, yes, accessibility is important, but maybe just off an arterial is a good site. Now, I'm sure neighbours around the property will say it's not, because it's not a conventional house or conventional dwelling. But I think that this particular block, the appeal of it is there is two frontages, so it does provide better accessibility. The Res Code assessment does meet site coverage and permeability, and therefore, yet, as Councillor Sharma and Councillor Adams has said, there are a lot of clauses that have been conditioned to make it compliant, and that could be because of the particular usage. So it's a very challenging application to assess. It is already in VCAT because we haven't decided in the set period whether or not that helps or hinders the final outcome. I don't know. But I just did want to really stress that point, that if we are, through our policies, trying to encourage diverse housing and particularly specialist disability accommodation, we can't necessarily completely dictate where these people have to live. I think my time's up. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, look, I wasn't going to speak on this, but I think that it's worth just clarifying that this isn't about, for me, this decision isn't about whether people with disabilities are where they're being asked to live in the municipality. This is a planning application, and it's about whether the plans for the planning application comply with various elements around, and they've just gone off the screen, setbacks, overlooking a whole range of issues that were listed in the refusal. It's certainly not about trying to dictate, I think were the words, where people with disabilities live in the community. It's a very difficult decision because I think everyone around the table certainly wants there to be diverse housing and wants there to be accessible. We know that there need to be more universally accessibly planned houses in Moonee Valley. We've heard that particularly from the great advocates in Moonee Valley carers. It's a very difficult decision for me. I think that the thank you and all of those clauses that have had to be conditioned by planners are up on the screen now. The overlooking, the accessibility, the private open space, the storage. There have been a lot of non-compliant elements that planners have worked hard to try to rectify. And it's on that issue that we're voting tonight, whether we're happy with those, with the plans themselves, and whether we think that they're now compliant with the planning scheme. I think, look, I could, honestly on this one, I could vote either way. I think that the fact that the matter is at VCAT means that to some extent our decision tonight, that the final decision will be made by VCAT. The parties are there, the report's been written, and I think it really is one that could go either way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa.
Mayor, can I ask a point of clarification through the chair?
Yes.
To the relevant officer. Can I ask if use of the land is relevant consideration in a planning application?
I'm happy to pass that through to the CEO if you wanted to direct that to somebody.
You need me to refer
Thank you, Susan Mayor. I will relay this to the manager, planning and building. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, could the question just be repeated, please? Is it about the use of the land?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just is the use of the land, so what the application is that a consideration in a planning application report?
It certainly is. It's a residential zone, and anything that is applied for in a residential zone has to fit into that zone. And the use of this particular application has triggered that application due to the use as well as the building works component, as would any three dwelling development, for example, would also trigger the same things.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barry. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, it is a really difficult application, and I agree with all the comments that have been made around the table tonight. I think in reading the report and how the officers have worked through and conditioned some of those points of non-compliance, and given, to Councillor Nation's point of clarification there was a comment in the report, and I've just skimmed through to try and find it, but where an application doesn't meet the requirements of the planning scheme but can meet the objective, net community benefit can be taken into account in deciding whether any non-compliance with the planning scheme is warranted for the particular thing. And I do, in reading through the officer's recommendation, I feel a bit more comfortable that the way that it's been conditioned, which includes to remove 4 bedrooms from the site to reduce the site coverage, and enforces compliance with the setbacks as well. So the conditions do address a lot of the size and bulk and scale and the setbacks overlooking that are of concern. It does bring it into an application that I would be happy to support, and I'll foreshadow a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation should this one fail. It is a really important thing to support, buildings of this type, and that is a factor in my thinking for that reason. That one of the things that creates a less permeability is a cover over the disabled car park, which is considered to be meeting the objective still of the planning scheme, although it doesn't meet the actual standard. By reducing the bedrooms as well in the dwellings, it moves from being 6 2-bedroom and 2 1-bedroom to being 6 1-bedroom and 2 2-bedroom. So it does also reduce the occupancy rate, and I know there was some concerns about, how many people, how many cars and things like that. So the conditions do address a lot of, or seek to address a lot of the concerns through the objections that have been raised, and in my view, make this an application that I'd be happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson, and just noting that you foreshadowed a motion. Councillor Isa?
Could I just ask a point of clarification, please, Mayor? Does the refusal cite use of the land as one of the reasons for refusing?
Site use. Site coverage is... site is in CITE. Does the refusal rely on or refer to the use of the land as one of the reasons for refusal? I don't believe so. I have to take that point of clarification through to the CEO, if you want to direct it, noting that it is a councillor's refusal.
I'm not sure whether, through the Mayor, is a clarification sort of from officers or from the councillor who made the motion, moved the motion?
Either is fine.
I might pass this to the Manager for Statutory Planning, Petrus Barry. If you got the refusal in front of you, if you want to interpret the wording. If not, I will have a copy here. Do this.
May, if I understand the question correctly, is, and as has been pointed out, it's not the officers recommending the refusal, but from what has been put on the screen, the use itself isn't seen as inappropriate from what has been put forward, but the associated design to accommodate the use is being listed as concerns, and therefore the grounds for the refusal is my reading of the refusal put up on the screen.
Thank you. Councillor Isa, does that answer your point of clarification? Thank you, and thank you for taking that point of clarification, Mr. Barry. Now, we've had Councillor Adams, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Hodgson and Isa and Nation speak. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No. Councillor Adams, would you like to close? No. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa. All those against is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne. That motion is lost. There was a foreshadowed motion flagged by Councillor Hodgson. So item 9.2, 5 Thelma Avenue, Essendon North. A motion, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. And a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Mayor, I'll just be brief. I think this is obviously a pretty line ball decision, and as I mentioned in my comments earlier, the officers have worked through some pretty extensive conditions to the permit, which include making sure the building is compliant with setbacks, reducing the number of bedrooms to reduce the actual site coverage. It addresses the report itself addresses some of those points of non-compliance and indicates why they're acceptable in the context of this design. Another key one is the neighbourhood character, the colour palette of the building materials are conditioned to be much lighter, not the very dark colours of the design, to fit in better with the surrounds and, soften some of that glazing of the windows to fix any auditory things, annotations of fence heights to ensure that neighbourhood overlooking and internal views is all compliant with the planning scheme. And as I said, this is a type of housing stock that I think is really valuable and am happy to support in the area. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll be brief. I'm satisfied that the officers, through their recommendation, have addressed most of the major concerns brought about by objecting parties. I'm also conscious that with the type of housing stock being the type of housing to support those with disabilities, it's difficult for it to essentially, I guess there's a reason why they have to be built differently compared to the typical housing stock, but I don't think that's a reason why we shouldn't support this sort of development, and I'm fully in support of ensuring that we build more housing stock that supports a diverse group of our community. So happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor? Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Adams. That motion is carried. Item 9.3 on the agenda is planning improvements. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Yes, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. And a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I won't say too much. This report was brought about in response to a notice of motion that I brought to Council in January last year in relation to the statutory planning at Moonee Valley City Council and some concerns that have been raised by residents and those that have had experience in the planning department in terms of the processing of planning applications. The report was raised to Council with the intention of performing a service review to see how we can improve our processes and improve our performance. I think the results are pretty outstanding. There's been a significant reduction in the backlog of planning applications and a significant increase in the number of applications that are being determined within the 60-day statutory time frame. So, just like to pass on my congratulations to the officers for their hard work with this one. I know it's been quite a lot of time and investment into improving these processes, but they are being noticed. I have been contacted by people within the community stating that they they've noticed that the system has improved and that the processes and the performance of the planning department has improved. So, well done to our officers.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson.
I'll just really briefly concur with Councillor Bedio's comments and just note my thanks as well. If you read through the report, you can hear the hint of pride coming through in what the officers have been able to achieve, and it's well-placed pride. I think they should be proud of the gains that they've made, and we are really, really appreciative of the efforts that have gone into this review and implementing what they've found.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I also want to commend the officers and the exec for actually, and I should sound surprised, but actually undertaking the body of work that I think was expected by the councillor unit. Planning has always had its challenges, as it probably does at any council. It's under-resourced by sheer nature of the world we're in, and therefore if you get a little bit behind, then you get a lot behind, and the nature of what we've been going through as a country and as a world over the past 24 months probably hasn't made that much easier at all. So I do want to commend officers on the extensive work that has been done preparing this report, to identify areas of improvement, to have made improvements, and in essence already making some really big strides in that customer, that customer-focused element of council, which is something that we know the CEO has really pushed since her appointment, was that understanding that our ratepayers, our residents, in essence, they're customers of council, and we need to ensure that customer experience and interaction is as positive as it can be. From a councillor perspective, the amount of frustrated constituents contacting me about planning matters is extremely minimal. And I mean people get frustrated at planning because they either like things or don't like things, or things impact them or don't. But in terms of processes, in the past, I would say almost 3 months, probably haven't had someone contact me and say, what's happening in the planning department, fix this, do this. And I see nods around the chambers as well. And that was something that we were experiencing last year. So I just, want to commend the organisation for, hearing our concerns as councillors sitting on the outside and actually acting on them, and not just acknowledging that it's councillors that are whinging about the organisation. I'm really impressed, and I think this is there's further improvements that will continue to get made, but I just am really reassured that the planning department has made some big inroads. So credit to officers, credit to the CEO. Well done. Happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor? Councillor Bedio, would you like to close? No? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.4 on the agenda, MV 2040 and Council Plan and Health Plan 2021 to 25 Integrated Strategic Indicator Framework. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Mayor, this is a really important piece of work on how we can report tracking against our strategic plan, There are, in the attachment, a lot of all of our strategic directions and, I lose the terminology, apologies, let me open it up for you. All of our strategic directions and council plan strategic objectives. officers with input from councillors have gone through and indicated how we're going to measure what success looks like. I'll note that there are a couple of the indicators that it's difficult to find a data set to measure exactly what we're trying to achieve in the strategic objective. One of those sits under our beautiful theme, a city that fosters local identities, and the measure is around satisfaction with how we are preserving Aboriginal cultural heritage. And I think a measure like that, where it's a bit difficult to find a data set that really captures the breadth of what a city that fosters local identities is trying to achieve, means that we just need to make sure we're still vigilant in watching, and taking every opportunity to achieve that strategic objective through what we're doing in council. But overall, it's a really important way that we can track, that we can report and be transparent with our community about how we're going. And happy to support the officer's recommendation here.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mayor. Not much further to add, except that these plans are living documents and that they change over time. And while we have some new things that we're measuring against, there's also things from previous council terms that in an ongoing nature we're measuring. Some are we're on track for, and some targets are aspirational. And, climate targets are a good example where we are aspirationally heading towards those and hoping to get there, but we can't guarantee it, but that's what we're aiming for and that's what we're pushing for in the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Hodgson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I really appreciate the work that's been undertaken to compile the targets. I do have some unresolved concerns, however, about what's being measured and why. The framework sets out measures such as the level of income inequality, the level of childhood obesity, the level of homelessness, households experiencing financial stress, and these are all things that we would really like to reduce. But there's nothing specifically in our council plan that is directed at these outcomes. If we measure homelessness, for example, decreasing, this will be a great outcome, and we do need to have a baseline level and to measure improvements hopefully over time. But those measurements of themselves wouldn't actually be monitoring the performance of our council plan strategies. An argument may be that the council plan doesn't include all of council's actions, and that's true, and the indicators are monitoring other actions of council that are included in MV 2040, and that may be the case, but that's the problem with the way the council plan and some of the indicators have been constructed, although I lost that argument in October of last year. Some of the indicators do align really well with the council plan, particularly the green and connected indicators, but others don't. For example, measuring a communication network of sensors to support the real-time collection of public data is not connected with council plan strategies. Measuring the proportion of adults experiencing food insecurity, again, a worthy measure, but it doesn't reflect any actions in the council plan, despite its importance. And measuring the proportion of residents who feel safe walking at night is in a similar situation. I know our officers have worked very hard on this. Given my concerns, I'm not sure whether I'll support it or not. I would really hope that we can keep making the alignment between and the cohesion between our council directions, strategies, objectives, indicators, measures, targets, make that a comprehensive package that all makes sense and helps us to monitor what we're able to bring as a council to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillors on this item? Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just note, thank Councillor Isa for the comments, and I think, as Councillor Tyson said, we're always seeking continuous improvement. When we originally saw this document, I think an indication of it came when we were discussing the four-year council plan, and I shared some of those concerns, and I think, in highlighting the beautiful indicator, it doesn't perfectly measure everything that we can do, but I do still see it as an important step in trying to identify, in a way that we can measure at the moment how we have improvement in the city. So understand those concerns, but still supportive of this.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.5 on the agenda is response to notice of motion 2021-34, Scout Hall audit. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm happy to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And a seconder, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will. I'm just conscious that there is content that's been moved into confidential between the briefing and the meeting, so I just want to ensure that the agenda I have open is correct.
No problems. We'll just pause your time, Councillor Nation, that's fine. Councillor Nation, do you want me to adjourn for a couple of minutes?
No, that's all right, yep. Thanks, Mayor. Sorry, I just wanted to ensure that I don't say any figures that have since changed since the briefing. So, look, I'm thankful to officers for bringing back this report and for it capturing the essence of what the notice of motion was seeking. I think I spoke about in our briefing last week. We had a really positive discussion about the data that was received and about looking at the range of different facilities. So I'm just really trying not to get called on anything here. So I'll just sorry for those that are watching. What was presented to us in the briefing is different to what's been presented tonight. So I just want to ensure that I don't say anything that would subsequently get me into trouble. So the report, the notice of motion sought to have a look at the Scout facilities throughout our municipality, particularly the structure of the ownership of these facilities, the tenure, their current usage, what their future use is incorporated in any of our master plans. Looking at the asset condition as well, because a lot of the Scout buildings were built in the 70s and 80s, and a lot of them are at end of life. I mentioned last week in our chat at the briefing that Councillor Adams and I, during COVID, would safely and according to the laws go on walks around Buckley Ward as newly elected councillors to explore parts of our municipality, and it was the facility at Cliff Allison that sparked a bit of interest as to what the hall was doing, its usage, and that started the piece of looking at how many different Scout facilities there were throughout our city. Also tied in with that was the Clifton Park Master Plan, which had the removal of an existing facility, and therefore this notice of motion, which was asking to give us some information really as to what state these facilities are in, what the ownership model is, and I guess how we as a council can continue to ensure that Scouts in our municipality have a future. I mentioned in the last meeting that I was a Scout and went all the way up to receive what was then the Premier's Award, but I think it's got a different name now. And Mum was also an Keeler at Cubs and then became a leader in the Scout troop as well. So I stressed at the time of moving this notice of motion, this is not me saying Scouts don't have a future in our city. This is not me trying to kick Scouts out of facilities, some of which that they've built and they own the building. This is looking at how we can encourage participation, ensure that the Scout groups in our area have facilities that they can use, and it's an extension of that 2018 review to look at the current state of all Scout halls. So sorry I haven't been as clear in my notes tonight, but as I said, the report before us changed between the briefing and the meeting, and I just don't want to get into trouble by saying anything that has been deemed confidential, so I shall leave it at that. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Bedio.
Not much further to add, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor on this item? Councillor Isa.
So there's no doubt from the debate last November that Council resolved to put the Scouts at the forefront of an audit of current Scout facilities. It was commented at the meeting that the audit would understand what the Scouts' needs are and how Scouts use facilities. The resolution was amended to include 2 separate mentions of consultation with Scouts. So it's puzzling to me that the consultation to date has been, in the view of local Scout leadership, and we've had an email just recently tonight, transactional, not meaningful, and absent of a desire to understand the needs of Scouts in Moonee Valley. To date, contact with local Scouts has been focused on collecting data, as Councillor Nations mentioned, filling out tables about asset use, and with a financial lens, not meaningful conversations about the outcomes of Scouts, how to encourage participation, how facilities can be ensured, how we can ensure that facilities are meeting the needs of Scouts and their programs. Nothing about what programs deliver, what the community benefits are, and crucially how, as I say, how facilities can support these outcomes. Now, it might be argued that this report has come to us for endorsement for further consultation with the Scouts. However, the meaningful consultation was meant to occur first to inform this report. Our resolution asked for this twice. And a great deal of effort at the meeting of November went into the words of the motion to put the Scouts at the centre of an audit of facilities owned, maintained and used by Scouts. Instead, we're being asked to endorse a confidential document for consultation with Scouts in the community, and I'm still not exactly clear what will be shared with the community and to what extent the report will remain confidential once it's shared with Scouts. I do note also that this is the 3rd time in recent council meetings that I've been puzzled by officers' interpretation of a council resolution, and I would like to have confidence that council resolutions are followed. The Scouts have not been at the centre of this audit. It has been focused on property assets. Properties that local Scouts have spent quite a bit of money maintaining since 2018, since the 2018 audit. I'd prefer to note the report, and I'd like to foreshadow an alternative motion, Mayor, that notes the report for further consultation and requests the CEO to provide a future report. I think there's a grammatical error in the recommendation in point B. I'm not supportive of endorsing what is effectively a confidential paper based largely on transactional email exchanges, and I'll finish this sentence if I may, Mayor, that in my view treats Scouts as a data set rather than a dedicated network of community volunteers striving to empower young people.
Thank you, Councillor Isa, and I note that you foreshadowed a motion. So far we've had a Councillor Nation speak, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? No. Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just state as the person who brought the notice of motion, and I mentioned it last week, this collation of data and information was the purpose of the notice of motion. So the notice of motion was called Scout Hall Audit. Like that was the notice of motion's title. And it was asking, I guess the first sentence is the primary reason for it, to receive a report back to Council in the first 6 months of 2022 provides an audit of community facilities in Moonee Valley used primarily for Scouts and Guides. And so for me, this is the data that we need as an organisation, and that we as individual councillors, because we're not employees, we're not the ones going out and seeking it and making all the different calls. The purpose was for officers to bring the data to us. We will then go out and consult as per the two-step process in point A. That future report will come back to us, and we will have all the information to then look at how we can guide Scouts and can ensure that Scouts' needs that we provide for Scouts into the future. So I'm thankful to the officers. I think that the data collection has been invaluable. It's exactly what I envisaged when moving this notice of motion, and in my opinion, it's going to put us in really good stead to go out, consult, come back, and look at a future for Scouts in our municipality. So I would commend councillors to support this recommendation that has been prepared by our officers.
Thank you. Councillor Nation, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypet, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. That motion is carried. Item 9.6 on the agenda is the Governance Rules and Incorporating Election Period Policy, Draft Amendment 2022, Virtual Meetings. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative, which I will read.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson.
That Council resolves to A, request the CEO to incorporate the following amendments into Chapter 3, Part C, Division 15 of the Draft Amended Governance Rules and Incorporated Election Period Policy, provided as Attachment 1 to the report. 1. Amend Rule 82.5.2 to read, quote, be given to the Chief Executive Officer no later than 6 hours prior to the commencement of the relevant council meeting, and, end quote. 2. Amend Rule 82.7 to read, the Chief Executive Officer may approve a request received less than 6 hours prior to the commencement of the relevant council meeting where there is a personal, health, family emergency or extraordinary circumstance, end quote. 3. Amend Rule 82.11 to read, quote, without detracting from anything said in Sub-Rule 82.10, the Chair will determine whether, in the circumstances, including any technical difficulties, the councillor can see and hear and be seen and heard sufficiently via electronic means to be considered in attendance at the meeting, end quote. 4. Amend Rule 82.12 to read, if Sub-Rule 82.11 cannot be met by one or more councillors attending a council meeting for a reason other than technical difficulties, end quote. And include an additional Rule 82.13 to read, quote, if Sub-Rule 82.11 cannot be met by one or more councillors attending a council meeting because of technical difficulties, the Chair will adjourn the meeting while all reasonable efforts are made to address the technical difficulties unless the relevant councillor consents to the meeting proceeding and being treated as absent from the council meeting or that part of the council meeting, end quote. And renumber Rule 82.13 and to 82.14 accordingly. And 5, amend Chapter 3, Part C, Division 15, Rule 83 to read, quote, if a council meeting is conducted wholly or partially by electronic means, council may, by vote, modify the application of any of the rules in this chapter to facilitate the more efficient and effective transaction of the business of the meeting, end quote. B, request the CEO to publish the draft amended governance rules and incorporated election period policy on Council's Your Say website and invite community feedback from 27 July to 10 August 2022 inclusive. And C, request the CEO to bring a further report at the council meeting of 23rd August 2022 summarising any community feedback received, any further legal advice and recommendations for the amended governance rules and incorporated election period policy for adoption.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Just to confirm, could you just repeat point C?
Yes. C, requests the CEO to bring a further report at the council meeting of 23rd August 2022, summarising any community feedback received, any further legal advice and recommendations for the amended governance rules and incorporated election period policy for adoption.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. And just to confirm, at the end of point B, you said end, but did you mean just to move on to point C? Is the end meant to be there?
As on the screen is fine. Thank you.
Want to read as is on the screen?
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. That is moved. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This comes to us given some changes to the Local Government Act 2020, which are coming into effect in September, and some recent advice and guidance provided by Local Government Victoria on how we'll need to amend our governance rule to allow electronic attendance and participation in council meetings and delegated committees on a permanent basis. Obviously, this came in during a state of emergency, but there are many benefits to being able to hold meetings virtually or in a hybrid format. And our officers have done some quick work to provide us with a recommended draft amended governance rules. There were just a few points in which I felt there could be some changed wording to just facilitate the whole thing a little bit easier. One of those is to amend the amount of notice required to 6 hours rather than 24. That has been in practice for us as a council in recent times, and I do feel that that's sufficient. It also allows for that circumstance where if someone is feeling a little unwell, and in the current circumstances it would be safer for all involved for them to attend virtually, on the morning of a meeting, it allows that situation. The point 2 just condenses that draft rule a little bit to mean that council resources, which might, just if it's an extra staff member or if it's just the use of, electricity for turning that screen on, aren't a reason to not allow a councillor to participate in a hybrid format if they request it. Point 3 just changes the wording a little bit to allow some of those circumstances. If someone's internet was a little unstable and they needed to turn their camera off, it wouldn't preclude them from being considered in attendance at the meeting. Point 4, I might leave to other councillors to discuss. It's one of those. It's one that I'll listen in on debate on. And point 5 is just amending the rule that says that the chair may modify the application of the rules to consider that council might modify our governance rules in the instance that it might facilitate a more efficient and effective operation of the meeting. The rest is, to my mind, still holding with the intent of the officer's recommendation. There is in point C the provision there, if necessary, for officers to seek any legal advice on the amendments should they be accepted by councillors tonight. But it may not be necessary. The governance team might feel, I'll leave that without further explanation and at the discretion of the CEO.
Well done. Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mayor, and I might just speak to a few of the points. So I think points A, 1 and 2 and 3 to a degree are quite common sense. I probably disagree with point 4, and because of that reason I might ask that the vote be split, Mayor. With regard to point 5, I think that makes sense and is probably consistent with the rest of our governance rules. B makes sense to me as well. I think that's really fixing a typo. C, I could take or leave. I don't really have a strong opinion on, but thanks, Councillor Hodgson, for bringing this and taking on feedback as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. And noting that you've asked to split the motion, I will do that when we go to vote. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Hodgson, for putting some work in to articulate this. All councils across Victoria are currently amending their governance rules by the 2nd of September to embed what is a good outcome of the pandemic, which is the capacity for councillors to attend meetings virtually. Certainly in 2010, with 2 small young children at home and a partner frequently away, councillors were not allowed to attend meetings virtually, and it prevented the attendance at meetings and participation in decision-making of councillors at that time. So I'm really glad that we're now embedding in our governance rules the capacity to do this, but we need to make sure that the rules that we're putting in place are fair, and I'm really comfortable that the proposal that Councillor Hodgson's put forward just now is very similar to the rules that are being passed across the state by dozens of councils. They're also similar, or they're drawing on the ministerial guidance and on some of the model rules, although I think there are probably some further potential changes that could be made with respect to the model rules, but we've got 2 weeks of consultation and we could perhaps talk a little bit further about those. With respect to the 6-hour change from 24 hours to 6 hours, I'm really pleased to see that, because kids don't always give you 24 hours notice that they're going to be sick. And you don't always have 24 hours notice of your own illness. So I think 6 hours is a more reasonable cut-off there. With respect to point 4, the proposal that was put to us meant that if a councillor, for whatever reason, dropped out of the meeting, they would, by necessity of they would be marked as, recorded as absent. And I just might request an extra minute just to make sure that I've got time to discuss this. So the proposal put to us was that, as I say, if a councillor dropped out of the meeting, they would immediately be recorded as absent. Now, this actually happened to me just recently when I was accidentally sent a 40-minute Zoom link for a council meeting. And it was just an accident, and we've all been on Zoom links where suddenly the time clock flashes up and we're dropped off the meeting. I would have really liked at that time for the meeting to have paused and for someone to have sent me a new link so that I could then rejoin the meeting. And point 4 really just means that if that happens, if there's a technical issue that's of no fault of anyone's, the meeting is adjourned while some reasonable efforts are made to reconnect that councillor to the meeting. If that can't happen within a reasonable time, or the councillor says, look, don't worry about it, it's all too hard, consents to the meeting proceeding, then the meeting can proceed. So that's all that point 4 does. It just embeds in our rules an understanding that technology is at the whim of the NBN, and we all know that that's a variable quality. So that's what point 4 is about. And I noticed that Councillor Tyson unfortunately has some misgivings about point 4 and hasn't been here to hear my terribly convincing arguments as to why he might like to vote for point 4, but hopefully he's okay. I think just the point about some legal advice, that's entirely up to the CEO whether there is any need to check any of these. I'm confident that they're drawn from good sources. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So we've had Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Isa speak. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Bedio.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm supportive of most of the amendments bar point 4 being, I'm not really sure what the definition of reasonable efforts would be, and I don't necessarily think that would be easy for the chair to determine what would be considered a reasonable effort, and would be quite open for debate and argument by councillors as to whether that's a fair ruling on what is considered a reasonable effort. I guess my concern is that an aggrieved councillor could pull out the NBN cable and say they've got technical difficulties and essentially derail a whole meeting. And while I completely agree that virtual meetings are and having the opportunity to partake in meetings and decision making virtually is important, I think we have to accept that there are some issues that come with that, and we need to just accept that. I think if we're going to partake in virtual meetings, that sometimes dropouts do happen, but we shouldn't have to derail the meeting or stop the decision-making process if that happens. Otherwise, what I would be more considerate of would be a more discrete determination on what a reasonable effort is, so that the chair has a bit more of a parameter to gauge time limit or something of the like, but obviously that's not what's before us, and I'm reluctant to make decisions on changes to the governance rules on the fly as well. So for that reason, I wouldn't be making any amendments at this point. So I look, at the rest of the amendments for me seem quite minor and I think are common sense. Point 4 is quite contentious, and I'm reluctant without further legal advice to accept a contentious governance rule amendment. So for that reason, I couldn't support point 4. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor to speak on this item? Councillor? Yes?
Could I move an amendment to pull out point 4 from where it is, and under C, not point 5, sorry, point 4, sorry, governance, point 4 from where it is, and put under C, do
you want to under point C as a point D, or just under point C?
I'm just trying to. So I'm just trying to make the sentence make sense. So, request the CEO bring back a further report at the council meeting summarising any community feedback received, any further legal advice
Councillor
on
Isaac.
point.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, on point. So any further legal advice, including on point 1 below.
Can we adjourn, Madam Mayor?
Well, no, don't on
what I
my
was
account, including on point
About
1
there.
below, and then just change that to a 1. And I would hope that might address. That's the amendment.
Thank
I
you.
hope there might be a seconder.
So, councillors, just to confirm the amendment, can everyone see as it is written on the screen? Can see that? Understand that?
Can I ask just a point of clarification?
Yep.
The amendment before us includes a renumbering?
It would, yes, it includes the renumbering as per on the screen. So 4's been deleted, 5 then comes up to 4 as per on the screen, and then 4 now turns into 1C, effectively. As per the, screen. Okay. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconder for the amendment? Not, it will. Councillor Adams, seconding. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thanks, Councillor Adams. I'm grateful for you seconding an amendment that I've just putting forward as a way of hopefully addressing Councillor Bedio's query. We're putting this out for 2 weeks of consultation, so I'm really open to, obviously, feedback coming through that from the community, from councillors, and it might be that during that period of consultation is where we could seek that legal advice on that point, as mentioned by Councillor Bedio. So taking it out from being included in the draft as it's going out, but instead just seeking some further legal advice on it, and that would then inform us as to whether we may or may not want to include that in the final version on the 23rd of August. If, in any case, if that legal advice might be helpful for a later date as well, because if we do undertake a more fulsome review of the rules at some stage, that legal advice could then help to inform that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams? Any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Bedio?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I don't have a problem with that, so long as, and I may need to seek a point of clarification here, possibly through you to the CEO, that...
So, Councillor Bedio, you meant to have your point of clarifications before it, when no one's speaking, but considering
Can I do it
you've
while
just
I'm speaking? Yeah.
started your speech, I'll take it as your point of clarification.
Yeah, sorry. Through to the CEO, that obviously this will come back to us after consultation for ratification or endorsement at the next council meeting.
So if you're directing it to me, it'll obviously be at the 23rd of August is the date that's on there.
With this in this amendment, if there was legal advice, that would come to us in that. That would come to us at that same council meeting.
I can confirm with the CEO. Thanks.
I'm not sure whether clarification should sort of from officers or from the council who made the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Bedio, would you like that to come from?
Look, that's fine. I think it's common sense. I'm just stating, and I hope it's recorded in the minutes, that obviously
Sorry, Councillor Bedio, so you're okay with the point of clarification? Now you're speaking on the amendment?
I don't like to, and that's why I don't like to have amendments on things like governance rules on the fly, because they are really important and we need to get them right. I'm hoping, by the way that this is worded, I can support it, because we won't be endorsing this to go out to consultation, but we're just seeking legal advice on the wording of this potential amendment. So for that reason, I don't have any problems with the amendment.
Thank you.
Point of clarification,
Councillor Sharp, yep.
Just in regards to Councillor Bedio's just comment then, the way I read that change is that it actually doesn't change anything in the motion. We're still amending it. So my point of clarification would be to the CEO, how was that change, renumbering, actually changing that motion?
So it wouldn't actually be included within the draft governance rules.
The word amend rule 82.212 is still there. It still says we're going to be amending that rule.
Yeah, but it's put in as...
Well, my point of clarification is to the CEO, please. The way I read that is there's actually no change to the motion. It's just a renumbering. I would like to be corrected if I am incorrect.
In terms of how it is going to be interpreted by the officers. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, the words are still there saying amend.
CEO, I'm mindful that this is an amendment, but if you can interpret how you will be...
So, through the Mayor,
how you'll be interpreting this.
I cannot advise because this sounds a fly. I would suggest if Mayor want to take a adjournment so we can have a consideration. Thank you.
Well, we'll stick to debate, I think.
So my point of clarification cannot be answered because to my mind that it does not change a thing. So, yep, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sharp. So on the amendment, we have had Councillor Isa, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio and Councillor Sharp speak. Did anybody else want to speak on the amendment? Oh, sorry, I took that as you speaking your comment at the end. Okay. Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I didn't elaborate on why I wasn't supportive of this point while I was speaking. I'm not supportive of this amendment either because I do believe it takes away from the prerogative of the chair and chairing a good meeting, and that's why really I'm not supportive. I think it does sort of lead to thinking that it sets precedent for when a councillor takes a bathroom break while we're in person. So that's really why I'm not supportive of the overall notion, whether it's being considered under point C or A. So that's why I'm not supporting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. Look, these changes I received them probably 5:30, probably after 5:30 tonight.
Point of order, Mayor.
It
Could we
is
stick to the
quite
amendment, please?
Sorry, Councillor Sharp, you just have to wait. There's been a procedural motion, a point of order. What's your point of order, Councillor Isa?
Just to stick to the amendment, whichever rule that is. Stick to the only speaking on the amendment, please, Mayor. I'll just I'll just have to find it in the rules.
Number.
I know.
Look, I can leave it for now, but I
Wanna
can
withdraw?
leave it for now.
Okay.
I'll just watch
Been
the
withdrawn.
vote.
Councillors, please. Councillor Isa's withdrawn the point of order. Councillor Sharp, if you'd like to continue.
Yes, thank you. I'm speaking to the amendment, which was emailed to us probably between 5:30 and 6 o'clock tonight, requesting a change to our governance rules without any conversation between councillors as such or any explanation regarding these rules. And it was claimed in the council meeting a couple of weeks ago, actually, that if we want to put up motions that change on officers' recommendation, that we should all be around the table at briefings
Mayor,
to
I'd
talk
like to
about
move
it.
a point of order, please.
And
Sorry, Councillor
tonight that
Sharp.
has not occurred.
Sorry, Councillor Sharp. We've got a procedural motion. Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move a point of order under Rule 34.4. Debate on amendment must be confined to the terms of the amendment. Thanks.
Hold on. Sorry, Councillor Nation. That's enough. Sorry, Councillor Isa. Can you just repeat that? 34.4. And what's your point of order?
That the debate needs to be confined to the... So I've just closed it up now. Debate on the amendment must be confined to the terms of the amendment.
And you're saying that Councillor Sharp wasn't talking about what the amendment was? Can you advise what words Councillor Sharp said that you're bringing this up on?
That there were discussions at the last meeting about... she said that the amendment had been brought to councillors just before the meeting. Well, in fact, the amendment's just been moved on the floor right now. She's talking about the motion and she's talking about discussions pertaining to the motion. The amendment has just been moved on the floor right now, so that's what needs to be discussed. The amendment is about moving it from being part of the draft that goes out for consultation to just asking for some legal advice on it.
Thank you. Look, 59.2, I'll rule against the point of order on that. I acknowledge that Councillor Sharp did say amendment was given before the meeting and noting that it was done on the floor, but I believe it was alternative, and I do believe that because we are talking about governance rules and they were governance rules, that I will allow it in this, for this particular time, as that was, it's in relation to governance rules, and I do think that
I'd like to challenge your decision on the point of order.
Sure. Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio, would you like to take over the chair? Due to COVID reasonings, we might just stay place.
Do you have a mover? Sorry, I might need governance rules on how
Point of clarification, I thought under governance rule 60.2 that Councillor Sypek would have moved the motion. We need a seconder for...
Let's leave the chair. Sorry, So, Councillor Sypek, just confirming that you're going under 60.1, that the chair's ruling be dissented from? Yes. When a motion in accordance with this rule, okay, yes, you're right, Councillor Nation, so you're moving that.
Mhm.
So moved, is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, it has lapsed. In that case, I will stay in my chair. Thank you, Councillor Sypek, and thank you, Councillor Nation. Sorry, Councillor Bedio, for not being able to take over the chair.
I tried, Councillor.
Now, I have to think of where we're at. So, I've ruled on the point of order. We are now heading back to Councillor Sharp is speaking on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm speaking on the amendment. There's been no change. Yes, the amendment has been moved on the floor to renumber the wording, but at the end of the day, the wording is as it is. My point of clarification cannot be answered because it cannot be interpreted any other way than what it is. There's actually no change to the renumbering. So my statement earlier about councillors were lambasted at our last council meeting about not speaking about issues in briefings beforehand when, a councillor wants to change an officer's recommendation. Yet we have an alternative here that is quite substantial and relates to our governance rules, and we as a councillor group have not spoken about it because councillors were not present at the briefing last week. So I wish to make that point because it's quite a valid point. Particularly with what occurred at the meeting 2 weeks ago.
Raise a point of order, please.
I am...
Sorry, Councillor Sharp, there's a point of order.
I'd like to raise a point of order under clause 55.4 that the comments made are misleading. And I think they're misleading because there have been emails about this since Saturday the 17th of July. I've probably sent about 4 or 5 or 6 emails and haven't received any response to those by councillors. So these matters have been circulated. There's not circulated amongst councillors since the 17th of July. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Isaac, can you confirm what comment you found was misleading?
That there's been no discussion or communication about any of these amendments or any of these thoughts.
Can I just confirm, Councillor Sharp, if they were your words?
I would like to confirm that I referred to our last council meeting when a councillor stated that all councillors should be at a briefing to discuss an alternative if such councillor proposes an alternative to an officer's recommendation. This has not happened here.
Sharp, I'm just trying to confirm what the...
Well, no, that was not my wording because I'm clearly stating, relaying what was said in the council meeting last week and reflecting it to tonight when we have an alternative presented to us at 5:30, which has not been discussed.
I'm just trying to work out the wording so I can rule on the point of order. And I believe there was 55, the point of order that was brought up was conduct that constitutes improper behaviour or conduct. Is that correct, Councillor Isa? Because 55.4,
You going to second it?
and that it was misleading because Councillor Sharp spoke about
how there'd been no discussion or circulation of any of the material that's been put to council tonight, and I wish that to be clarified because there was certainly. Thank you.
Sorry, and I just need to clarify. I do believe you said that there was no discussion or circulation. Is that right?
I'm referring to the fact that councillors weren't present at the briefing last week to discuss this, which is the fact.
So you're
that
just
is a fact.
referring to
It
the
is
briefing.
not misleading. That is a fact.
Councillor Sharp, I'm just trying to get the words right of what you said. So you said that at the briefing there wasn't discussion.
That wasn't what was said, Mayor. It's okay.
Excuse me, please replay it. I said it at least 4 times now. I'm happy to say it again.
Councillor Sharp, thanks. I think that if we're going and the individual words that are said are very hard to memorise, and I don't know exactly word for word, and I don't have a live action replay on this. Councillor Isa, you've said that you're happy to leave it. Councillor Sharp, you have said that it was the discussions within the briefing. If you're right to drop the point of order, Councillor Sharp, if you wanted to continue from where you were in regards to your speaking on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've repeated myself 4 times now, so I probably don't need to go over it, aside from the fact that I won't supporting these alternatives that were presented to me after 5:30 tonight. There's too much of a potential substantial change. It hasn't been explained adequately nor discussed.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Now, on the amendment, we have had Councillor Adams, Bedio, Isa, Sharp and Tyson speak. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I personally prefer the amendment stay where it is, but just to offer my opinion on the impact of this amendment is that when the wording sat under point A, which was to request the CEO to incorporate the following amendments into the chapter, the impact would be to have that included in the draft amended rules. By moving it down under point C, which has the stem of to bring a further report back to Council summarising community feedback and legal advice on the point, it doesn't actually have the impact of changing the draft rules in this motion. That's my interpretation of the change in this amendment. If it provides other councillors with a bit of greater comfort about considering this change, I suppose I can support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would anybody else like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor, and I think the past 15 minutes have been a good example of why governance rules need to be thoroughly looked at and thought out, and in regards to the specific amendment, which I would contest, it does include points other than CI, given it the amendment renumbers point 5 to point 4. Nevertheless, it would be, in my opinion, correct to say that the block of text that has been moved from point 4 to point C1 under this amendment was only provided to us as written via email at 6:30 p.m. I am on the understanding that is, from my view, still a little bit of concern about exactly how things will subsequently integrate into the draft rules, or exactly what the final version would be should this amendment get up and therefore take out point 4 and make 5(4), what actually is going out to be consulted on. So I won't support the amendment, but I did want to back up Councillor Sharp in that this text, as presented there, that has been moved from point 4 to point C1, was received at 6:30 p.m. Now that is fair.
Thanks, Councillor Nation. Now, Councillor Seipert, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sort of understand what Councillor Isa is trying to do here, but I can also see the other side too. The problem that I have here, Madam Mayor, is this has now descended into anarchy, and I really don't know what this is all about, and I think the community probably wouldn't even understand what's been going on in the last 15 minutes. So the biggest thing out of all this is we have to go and get legal advice. Now, how much is that going to cost, Madam Mayor? So I'd rather than put this out and then go and get legal advice, let's get the legal advice first, put this together and then present it to council that can go out for consultation. I think we're putting the cart before the horse here, Madam Mayor. So I I want to support it, but I don't. And I just don't know where this is going to end up. But all I can see here is legal advice, and all I can see is council's going to have to spend money for this legal advice.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Now, everyone has now spoken on the amendment. Therefore, Councillor Isa, would you like to close on the amendment?
Thanks very much, Mayor. The wording included in point 1 there was actually emailed to all councillors on Monday morning at 10:35am, and the wording hasn't changed in that point 1. So it's just not correct to say that those words, that's the first time that people have seen those words. Secondly, moving it from the stem of A to the stem of C absolutely, categorically, means that it's not part of the draft going out for consultation. There's no other way to read that motion other than to read it as now being separate from the draft going out for consultation and just being something that is on which some further advice is being sought, which the whole point of the amendment was in direct response to some comments made by Councillor Bedio that he would like to receive some legal advice on that particular point. So the amendment is a direct way of facilitating that. Grammatically, it perhaps should have said amending, but it doesn't make any difference because the stem under which it falls is point C, and the motion has clearly point A, the things that are going to be in the amendment, and point C includes one point to get some further advice on in amongst what it also says. The other point that was made about whether this gives, and I'll take the point from Councillor Tyson, and I think obviously that's something that we could work through over the next 2 weeks of discussion and feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson. That amendment is lost. We'll move back to the substantive. The substantive, I have it moved by Councillor Hodgson, seconded by Councillor Tyson, and Councillor Bedio and Councillor Isa have spoken to the substantive. Would anybody else like to speak to the substantive? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, maybe in my old age I'm forgetting things, but the point 4, which will go back, from my understanding at 6:30pm, 8:12 was changed from 8:11. 2 clauses were combined. I'm just trying to find that in a 10:35 email on Monday. So I'm open to support changes to our governance rules, but if councillors think that we weren't scrambling at 6:25 delaying the meeting to try to understand what this alternative was, then maybe we've got a completely different recollection. But the mover of the motion, I would have thought, was trying to clarify things at 6:37pm. So the idea that this was all provided to us beforehand, I'm trying to find that exact point. I've done a search for it through multiple emails. Maybe that's just a different way of doing things, but I just don't think that it can be argued that we weren't scrambling at 6:37 to still get clarification about exactly what was being proposed, what the exact wording was, which of the multiple clauses in multiple emails was what was getting put up. So I just think if we want to support each other's recommendations, then let's not try to not acknowledge that some of us were still seeking answers at 6:37pm.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on the substantive? Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm thinking back to my speaking earlier. I was remiss in not highlighting some of the other changes to the governance rules that are being proposed, but given not bringing up new things in debate, I won't. I'll just encourage people to participate in the community engagement through the Your Say page and have a look. In particular, there's removal of non-gender neutral language, which I think is a positive step. And I offer my apologies to those watching at home for the complicated nature and councillors around the table. I was also remiss in not thanking colleagues for their participation both in this debate and in discussions ahead prior to the meeting on how we can make these governance rules the best that we can. You've given them a good exercise in this debate, and it shows the importance of getting these right. So I do appreciate everyone's patience and participation in this, and I won't go any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Now, there has been the request to split the motion, so I will do in separate A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, then B, then C. So there'll be quite a number of votes. So the first bit that I will put to the vote is A, request the CEO to incorporate the following amendments into Chapter 3, Part C, Division 15 of the draft amended governance rules and incorporated election period policy provided as attachment 1 to the report. 1, amend Rule 82.5.2 to read, be given to the Chief Executive Officer no later than 6 hours prior to the commencement of the relevant council meeting. And all those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against is Councillor Sypek. That is carried. The next bit to the vote is A with the preamble, and then 2, which reads amend Rule 82.7 to read the Chief Executive Officer may approve a request received less than 6 hours prior to the commencement of the relevant council meeting where there is a personal health, family, emergency or extraordinary circumstance. All those in favour? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against is Councillor Sypek. Number 3, the A as read previously, and 3, amend Rule 82.11 to read without detracting from anything said in sub-Rule 82.10, the Chair will determine whether in the circumstances including any technical difficulties the councillor can see and hear and be seen and be heard sufficiently via electronic means to be considered in attendance at the meeting. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation. That is carried. The next is A, and as read before, and 4, amend Rule 82.12 to read if sub-Rule 82.11 cannot be met by one or more councillors attending a council meeting for a reason other than technical difficulties, and include an additional Rule 82.13 to read if sub-Rule 82.11 cannot be met by one or more councillors attending a council meeting because of technical difficulties, the Chair will adjourn the meeting while all reasonable efforts are made to address the technical difficulties unless the relevant councillor consents to the meeting proceeding and being treated as absent from the council meeting or that part of the council meeting, and renumber Rule 82.13 to 82.14 accordingly. All those in favour? That is Councillor Isa. All those against is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne. That is lost. The next is A, as read before, and 5, amend Chapter 3, Part C, Division 15, Rule 83 to read if a council meeting is conducted wholly or partially by electronic means, council may, by vote, modify the application of any rules in the chapter to facilitate the more efficient and effective transaction of the business of the meeting. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bedio, and that motion is carried. Next is B, request the CEO to publish the draft amended governance rules and incorporated election period policy on Council's Your Say website and invite community feedback from the 27th of July to the 10th of August 2022 inclusive and I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against is Councillor Sypek. The last one is C, request the CEO to bring a further report at the council meeting of the 23rd of August 2022 summarising any community feedback received, any further legal advice and recommendations for the amended governance rules and incorporated election period policy for adoption. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp. No, down. Sorry, I'll read that again. Councillor Tyson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against is Councillor Sypek and Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So that is item 9.6, which was the last from the main reports on the agenda. We now move to item 10 on the agenda, which is notices of motion, and I don't have any for tonight. So item 11 on the agenda is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business for tonight?
Mayor, can I just clarify through you with that last motion whether there was subsequent renumbering with the part of the motion that was lost?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Thanks.
I think it would.
It was, yeah.
Okay, urgent business. Was there any urgent business for tonight? Interesting time to touch your hair, Councillor Adams. Okay. So now we're on to item 12, which is the confidential reports. The next item of business is confidential reports. We have listed, and we do have 3 councillors that have declared a conflict in this item. So, councillors, I need a motion that council resolves to close the meeting to the public pursuant of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to discuss the following matter. 12.1, expressions of interest for proposed lease at 45 Valley Lake Boulevard, Keeler East. Item 12.1 is considered confidential under the terms of section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020 as it contains information relating to A, council business information being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, E, being information to which legal professional privilege or client legal privilege applies, F, being information which is released would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs, G, being private commercial information being information provided by a business, commercial or financial undertaking that 2, if released, would unreasonably expose the business, commercial or financial undertaking to disadvantage. As the item contains confidential council business, legal privilege, personal and commercial tender information. Councillors, do I have a motion? So I have a mover and seconder for that motion?
I'll move, thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Tyson and seconding Councillor Hodgson. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So item 12.1 on the agenda is the expression of interest for a proposed lease at 45 Valley Lake Boulevard, Keeler East. Oh, we're cutting the screen. I should say goodnight to everyone online. I got very carried away, so for those of you who are joining us online, I'm sorry, we have to say goodbye. Otherwise, you'll be listening to confidential information. So goodbye, have a good night, and enjoy.